You save $800 every month. You avoid credit cards. You pay cash for everything. And after 15 years of discipline, you have $144,000 in the bank. Your neighbor took out a $200,000 mortgage on a rental property 8 years ago, put down $40,000, collected rent every month, never touched his savings account. Today, he has $380,000 in equity. You followed every rule about staying out of debt. He broke all of them. Yet somehow, his net worth grew faster than yours while he worked less and risked money he didn't even own. The math doesn't add up, unless you've been calculating wealth wrong this entire time. Here's what most people don't understand about money. The wealthy don't get rich by earning more or saving harder. They get rich by controlling assets they don't fully own. It's called leverage. And it's the single largest gap between how middle-class people build wealth and how rich people do. When you save $50,000, you own $50,000. When someone uses that same $50,000 as a down payment on a $250,000 property, they control $250,000. The property appreciates, the rent covers the mortgage, and the equity builds on the full value, not just their initial investment. Same starting capital. Completely different mathematics. This isn't about taking reckless risks or gambling with money you can't afford to lose. It's about understanding the difference between debt that destroys and debt that multiplies. One keeps you working for 40 years. The other builds wealth while you sleep. Most people were taught that all debt is dangerous. That's not quite true. Consumer debt is dangerous. Investment debt, when structured correctly, is how assets get acquired without waiting decades to save the full purchase price. The real question isn't whether you should use leverage. It's whether you understand how to use it without destroying your financial position in the process. That's what we're breaking down today. No hype, no get-rich promises, just the actual mechanics of how borrowed capital becomes a wealth multiplication tool when deployed into cash-flowing, appreciating assets. If you want more breakdowns like this, where we look at the actual math behind wealth building, not the motivational stories, subscribe to the channel. No fluff, just financial mechanics that actually scale. Drop a comment if you've been avoiding debt entirely, or if you're already using leverage. Let's see where most people are starting from. Let's look at two people. Both earn $75,000 a year. Both save the same percentage. Both work the same hours. Neither gets a promotion or inheritance. After 10 years, one has $180,000 in net worth. The other has $890,000. That's not a typo. That's a 5 times difference. Same effort, same income, same discipline. The gap didn't come from working harder or earning more. It came from one decision, whether to deploy savings into assets they could leverage or keep everything in cash where it grew linearly. That gap is the entire game. Here's how it works. You borrow money at one rate and put it into something that returns a higher rate. That difference is yours to keep. If you can borrow at 7% and the asset grows at 11%, you're making 4% profit on money you don't even own. But here's the part most people miss. When that asset appreciates, it doesn't just grow on your down payment. It grows on the entire value. Your $50,000 becomes the control mechanism for $250,000 worth of real estate. The appreciation happens on the full $250,000, not just your initial stake. Wealthy people aren't avoiding debt. They're using very specific types of it to control assets that produce returns above the borrowing cost. That's the difference. Let's run the actual numbers. You buy a $250,000 property, put down $50,000. Borrow $200,000 at 7%. Monthly rent comes in at $2,200. Your mortgage payment is $1,331. Expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance run about $600. That leaves $269 in cash flow every month. Now add appreciation. Even at a conservative 3% annually, that's $7,500 on the property's full value. Cash flow for the year, $3,228. Appreciation, $7,500. Total return, $10,728 on your $50,000 investment. That's 21.5%. The same $50,000 in an index fund averaging 10% gives you $5,000 a year. The difference? Leverage lets you capture growth on $250,000 while only putting in $50,000. The math gap is structural. Now here's what you actually control. The leverage ratio. Put down 10% instead of 20%, and your return jumps to 28%. But your margin gets thinner. Go with 30% down, and you're at 14% return, but way more cushioned against problems. Interest rates matter too. A 6% mortgage versus 8% on $200,000, that's $4,000 a year in your pocket or theirs. Then there's asset choice. Cash-flowing properties are defensive, appreciation-only plays are aggressive, and reserves aren't optional. 6 months of mortgage payments sitting liquid is the difference between investing and gambling. You're not locked into one approach. You're choosing your risk level through how much you borrow and how much cash you keep back. Not all debt works the same way. Consumer debt, car loans, credit cards, puts you in the hole on things that lose value. Investment debt puts you in position on things that gain value and generate income. The 2008 crash taught this clearly. People speculating without cash flow got wiped out. People with rental income covering their mortgages, most survived. 3 rules make this work. Rent has to exceed all your costs. You need 6 months of payments in reserve per property. And you assume 3% appreciation, not 10%. Leverage without those protocols is just gambling with extra steps. Leverage with them becomes predictable wealth engineering. Same tool. Completely different outcome based on how disciplined you are with the setup, the usual hesitations. I don't have $50,000. Start smaller. FHA loans go as low as 3.5% down. Live in it. Rent out rooms, build equity for 2 years. What if the market crashes? If your rent covers the mortgage, you can wait it out. Price drops only matter when you're forced to sell. I'll lose everything. Only if you skip the reserve fund. That's why the 6-month buffer isn't optional. But I'm paying the bank interest. You pay $14,000 a year in interest, sure. You collect $26,000 in rent, net positive. Debt stresses me out. Consumer debt should. Investment debt with positive cash flow is just math running in the background. Here's how it scales. You buy property 1. Let it build equity for 2 years. Then use that equity plus new savings for property 2. Repeat that pattern. Properties 3, 4, 5, each one funded partially by the equity position in the last. 10 years in, you control 5 properties. Total value, $1.25 million. Total cash invested, $250,000. Equity captured from appreciation alone, $429,000, plus whatever cash flow stacked up across the portfolio. The velocity compounds when you redeploy equity instead of pulling it out as spending money. Each property becomes the foundation for the next one. That's how the gap widens. Look at it over time. Save $500 a month for 40 years with no leverage, and you end up with $240,000 in cash. Or use $30,000 as a down payment at age 30. Make the same $500 monthly commitment toward the mortgage. By 60, now you own a property free and clear worth $750,000. Same monthly discipline, exponentially different outcome. Time is the one thing you can't get back. Leverage buys you decades. It compresses what would take 40 years of pure saving into 10 or 15 years of strategic borrowing. That's the actual trade. Start here. List every debt you have. Mark each one, consumptive or productive. Consumptive debt gets paid off fast. Productive debt capacity gets calculated. How much mortgage could you carry with positive cash flow? Then build reserves. Month 1, stack 6 months of expenses plus a down payment fund. Month 2, get pre-approved, study your local rental market. Month 3, run the numbers on 20 properties, make your first offer. You've been taught to fear the tool that built every major fortune. The question isn't whether to use leverage, it's whether you'll learn to use it correctly before you run out of time.